Okay, I'd like to open the March meeting of the Metro North Committee. At this time, I ask that you join me in a moment of silence in the memory of James Rumensoff, a third railman at Metro North who was fatally struck by a train earlier this month. Thank you. We have no public speakers. It's probably due to the early hour. Before we go through today's agenda, I want to say that the committee needs to use the limited time we have each month for our meetings as efficiently and effectively as possible. We have an extensive agenda most months, and even though we have added an hour, half hour today to our usual monthly or hourly meeting, we would likely not be able to cover every item in it. So I asked of my fellow committeemen to keep that in mind as we go forward through the agenda each month, and to always take the opportunity outside of the meeting itself to reach out to Joe and his staff at any time, either before or after our meetings. I have always found that they are readily accessible and able to provide us detailed information on any agenda item or railroad-related topic. It's really a matter of courtesy to our other committees who, since we're first, get shoved to the rear when we go a half hour or 45 minutes overtime. So maybe we can, like I say, a lot of our questions can be asked of Joe and his committee before or after the meetings.
Jim, will the extension be permanent now?
Huh?
Is the extension permanent?
No. Okay, I'd like to ask for a motion to accept the minutes as requested, please. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. The work plan is in the agenda and there are no changes to the plan. President's report. Joe, you're on.
Okay. This is my second meeting and there's a lot that we have to discuss. I'm going to break it down into various categories. The first is on the tragic death of a power department employee on March 10th. Second, the results of the Federal Railroad Administration's deep dive review on March 17th. Third is the status of Metro North's 100-day action plan. Fourth is the fatal explosion and building collapse in Harlem adjacent to our tracks, and the imminent resumption of the right-of-way improvements in the Bronx. I'm going to ask that you hold questions until the end so that way I can do my best to answer them, and also at that point we can go through a lot of the issues in a little bit more detail. Let me start with the fatal accident. On Friday, March 7th, work began at one of our critical switch locations right on the Park Avenue Viaduct. The work was progressing well and the employees were dispatched to the field to reattach jumper cables, one of the last steps before returning the switch back into service. While performing this piece of work at 12:55 a.m. on March 10th, 3rd Railman James Romanoff, an 8-year veteran of Metro North, was struck and killed by a train. While we're all deeply saddened by this tragedy and our heart and prayer go out to our co-workers' loved ones, Tom and I also attended the wake along with most of the senior staff that's here. The incident is under investigation by the National Transportation Safety Board, the 5th active NTSB investigation into Metro North accident in less than a year, not a record of which any of us are proud. As a party to this investigation, I am limited to what I can say at this time. However, I can say, and I will keep repeating, that keeping our customers and employees safe is the most important job we have on the railroad. We will find out the facts of this accident and take whatever steps are necessary to fix what went wrong. As we are made aware of the improvements that can be made before the conclusion of any investigation, we will make those available as well. And on Friday, March 14th, we received a list of improvements to be made by the Federal Railroad Administration as a result of their FRA deep dive. So let's talk about the FRA Deep Dive Review. This review began on December 16th. More than 40 FRA inspectors from around the country spent 2 months reviewing documents, protocols, and procedures. They interviewed dozens of Metro North employees. To say it was an intense process is an understatement, and while it was a difficult one for the railroad, I wish to thank the professionals at the FRA for their time and effort. Unfortunately, the breadth of problems identified in the report is sobering, but to be very frank, the issues that were uncovered in the 60 days confirm my own initial assessment of Metro North's culture and priorities. Our training programs need improvement. Our safety department must become a more integral part of how we evaluate work and conduct business every day, not just when an accident happens. And operating trains on time cannot be more important than operating safely. Safety will be our top priority. I said it earlier and I'll say it again, keeping our customers and employees safe is the most important job we have on this railroad. There is nothing more important. Metro North has been working with the FRA since the first in these recent series of accidents that occurred last year and has taken many important steps towards reestablishing safety as the unmistakable priority in the running of the railroad. As I told you at the February meeting, I have reorganized the Metro North Safety Department to focus solely on safety. This is in concert with our chairman's view that safety must be a priority throughout the MTA. On March 11th, we instituted a company-wide safety stand-down. We've committed to meetings of this nature every quarter. This quarter, we will have 2. In December, we reduced our maximum authorized speed in advance of 4 critical curves and 5 movable bridges until we could design and install an automatic speed reduction component into our signal system at these locations. Signs were posted to remind our crews of the speed changes, and crew members were required to communicate with the engineer prior to arriving at these locations to ensure compliance. I am happy to report that as of Friday we have completed the modifications to the signal system at each of these locations 5 months ahead of schedule. We have done over 300 audits of speed compliance in February alone and more than 3,000 since December to ensure that all our trains are in compliance. We are on schedule to begin installing alerters on all of our older equipment this spring. Design for this improvement is underway. We have agreed to be one of the first commuter railroads to implement the FRA's Confidential Close Call Reporting System, C3RS, railroad-wide. The FRA's process requires negotiating a memorandum of understanding with the partners in this process, FRA, Metro North, and our labor unions. Those conversations are continuing so that our employees can report information without fear of reprisal, and we can use that information to improve our safety performance. Today we are asking for authorization to move forward on installing inward and outward facing cameras in the operating cabs of all our trains as the NTSB has recommended. And we will work aggressively to install positive train control as quickly as possible. Positive train control, or PTC, is the most modern type of train protection, but it is also the most complex. We will work quickly, but we will also take time to do it correctly to ensure our customer safety. In short, we are buying new equipment, hiring more staff, changing our management structure, reviewing our programs, and reaching out to our partners in labor, all to make this railroad as safe as possible. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but every problem I've seen here can and will be fixed. Though the report is critical of several areas at our agency, I want to call out this statement as well. The FRA report stated, they are, quote, encouraged by the many good employees who met with our deep dive teams. Their dedication and desire to turn Metro North into a safe, professional railroad serving the citizens of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. This is an important statement, but I would take it a step further. I'm not encouraged by the quality of the workforce at Metro North. I'm convinced that this workforce can and will dedicate itself to improvement. Metro North is not separate from its employees. It is its employees. Its action and dedication of 6,000 employees every day make this railroad work. Everyone at this railroad will come together at all levels. We will continue to work hard until the safety-first way of working is as effortless as breathing. Working towards achieving this goal is an integral part of the 100-day plan that I distributed to you 2 weeks ago. Let me talk a little bit about the 100-day plan. When I've heard others refer to their 100-day plan, it usually means they've taken 100 days to develop the urgent actions and guiding principles of their organization. As you can understand, I didn't have the luxury of that much time. So my 100-day plan outlines those concrete initiatives that will either be completed or begun in 100 days. Each one must support one or more of 4 important goals: promoting a culture of safety, adopting concrete safety enhancements, restoring reliable service, and improving communication both to employees and to customers. I will tell you that most of the initiatives already identified fall under the first 2 goals, as they should. In addition, we will include the directives and recommendations contained within the FRA's review. Many are identified in our report already. We will also include the findings of the MTA's Blue Ribbon Panel on Safety. That report will be coming soon. I would note a few additional important initiatives. We are in the process of completing a detailed study of the New Haven line train performance and running time. By doing this study, we intend to implement a new timetable by May 11th that is much more reliable than one we have in place today. We are finalizing the 2014 track maintenance program, including a plan to complete the ongoing track work in the Bronx. The Bronx track program begins this weekend and will be completed before the May 11th schedule change. In conjunction with the Connecticut Department of Transportation, we have established a technical working group to identify and implement a fix for the malfunctioning gate crossings on the Danbury branch. And we are creating additional opportunities for two-way dialogue between Metro-North Railroad and its customers. We are committed to 6 informal meetings during the 100 days, the first of which takes place this Wednesday afternoon from 4 to 6 in Grand Central Terminal. We have already made the Contact Us buttons on the Metro-North website easier to find and use, and we will develop and implement a comprehensive service disruption operations plan in Grand Central Terminal to improve communication to employees and in turn to our customers. This is just a partial list, nonetheless it is ambitious. My deadline is June 11th. Some milestones have already been achieved, and we have scored up on a scorecard on the web to keep customers and other stakeholders informed of our progress. Just because I have a 100-day action plan doesn't mean the work stops on day 101. We have a lot of work to create a culture in which safety is the most important priority, to fix what's broken with this railroad and its physical plant, its procedures, and its organizational structures, to win the confidence and trust of our customers and the other stakeholders. You have my commitment and that of my senior team that we will work hard to achieve these goals. In terms of the Harlem building explosion and collapse, all train service was suspended in and out of Grand Central at approximately 9:30 a.m. on Wednesday, March 12th, following the Harlem and debris landing on the adjacent tracks of the Park Avenue Viaduct. Fortunately, there were no trains impacted or stranded due to this tragic event. Customers were informed of our alternate service plan in and out of the city: Hudson Line service to and from Yankees East 153rd Street with nearby subway service, Harlem and New Haven Line service to and from Wakefield or Woodlawn stations with nearby subway service. New York City Transit cross-honored Metro-North tickets, and the same was done for Hudson Line customers. Third Rail Power was de-energized to all 4 tracks in the area of the explosion, and we worked closely with the New York Fire Department and emergency personnel throughout the situation. At approximately 3:45, limited train service was resumed in and out of Grand Central on the New Haven and Harlem lines, operating on the 2 tracks farthest from the explosion site after they were cleared of debris, inspected, and approved for operations. The track configuration did not allow for Hudson Line service to resume until more tracks were restored to service. This occurred 1 hour later, when all service in and out of Grand Central Terminal was restored on all 4 tracks. At the fire department's request, all trains ran at reduced speed throughout the affected area during the rescue and recovery efforts until Friday afternoon, when the restriction was lifted. The right-of-way improvements resume. As mentioned earlier, on March 31st, we continue with our aggressive track improvements system-wide to ensure the overall safety and reliability of the railroad. The next round of work will begin on Track 1, one of the two center tracks between Melrose and Woodlawn stations. New Haven and Harlem lines will operate over the 4 tracks in this area and then merge with the Hudson line south of this location. The track will remain out of service continuously until early May so that the track can be rebuilt and drainage can be improved. Once the work is completed, crews will clean up the debris in the area as quickly and efficiently as possible. When this phase of the work is completed, it will allow for the current 40-mile-per-hour speed restriction on that center track to be lifted, resulting in improved performance and reliability in time for our next timetable change on May 11th. Speeds on the other 3 tracks were increased to 75 miles per hour last fall following the completion of track improvements in this 6-mile section. The availability of 3 tracks in this area of the Bronx will limit our operating flexibility in the event of an incident affecting service, which may result in delays. Weekday peak period busing will be in effect for Melrose and Tremont customers during the duration of this work. Train service at these 2 stations will be provided during the off-peak and weekends. Through the end of the year, we will be making track improvements between Harlem 125th Street Station and Mott Haven in the Bronx. This work will be performed on weekends only so as to not impact the weekday service. Beginning June, right-of-way improvements will take place between Riversdale and Greystone stations on the Hudson line. We will provide more details prior to the start of the work, and we are implementing a customer communication plan on this work that includes seat notices, email alerts, and web notices. And I'm sorry that I've taken so much time in going through, but as you can see, this first month has been a very intense one with a lot of sobering information that I've had to deliver to you. But at this point, if there's any questions, I'm more than willing to answer your questions.
Mr. President, is there anything inherently inconsistent between on-time performance and safety?
You know, the problem is that even when Gotham Culture went out to go and ask the employees what was the most important factor in their work, the answer they got back was getting a train in on time. Now, a safe railroad can and will be operated on time. But the problem that has been pointed out is that when on-time performance overweighs all other factors, then you have a cultural problem. So to answer your question, and I'm sorry, I should have gone through the chair. We should be hearing that the safety of the passengers and the employees is the #1 priority.
Well, if you take a train and you leave it in the station, you're guaranteed safety, aren't you? But you're not going to be getting there at all. My only point is this: isn't the key to have a safe on-time performance and trying to have a balanced approach rather than to tip the scale one way or the other?
Get through the chair. You know, if we were a well-run railroad, I would completely agree with that assessment. It is a balance. But if you look at the reports that you've been given from both the NTSB, although that's just a preliminary and their full will come out later, but the FRAs has been abundantly clear that it was a culture that was driven by on-time performance, then the first thing you have to do is take away that as being a priority or a compromise and make it that people truly understand safety has to be of the utmost importance. I'm not going to disagree with you that it's a balance, but I am going to say to you that we have to send out a very clear message in terms of the safety.
And I'm not, with respect, disagreeing with you one iota. What I am suggesting to you, however, is the following: that unless we make clear to the public that we are prepared to deliver a safe, on-time performance, a balanced approach, they're going to stay in the cars and you're going to lose the riders. And the purpose is to provide mass transit. And what we've been doing, and I understand why we've been doing it, and I don't gainsay it, but what we've been doing is effectively saying to them, safety is probably our prime, if not only, concern. And it seems to me balance is appropriate.
Mr. Chair. You are correct. Balance is appropriate. And the balance is going to be when we turn around and we also go through our schedule change that we're looking to implement in. And we not only are putting in a schedule change that is succinct, we're going to go through every single train, and I'm going to be bringing that to your attention in the next month or so. And we've gone through every single delay that's been experienced over the last year, what caused it, where the delays were, so we can put out a schedule that truly reflects how the trains operate, and we can meet that schedule going forward. The other part I'd say to you is that even in the last month, with the emphasis on safety, nobody is staying in a station to not get the trains in. Our on-time performance, though not stellar, is a good on-time performance. It's been probably the worst that we've seen in recent years for Metro North, but people are getting those trains in the 80th and 90th percentiles. So if you look at it from that standpoint, the message is not being compromised, but the emphasis truly has to, if there truly is, if you believe at all, that there is an issue with safety being a top priority, then you have to stand by the statement that it is safety, and we have to emphasize the safety. And at some point in the future, I'll come back in with safety and bring in your trains in on time. I'll take that into consideration.
Let me ask one final question in this regard. You commented upon new schedules. I sincerely hope that one solution to on-time performance is not simply adding 5 or 10 minutes to the schedule so that you can get there on time, even though you're getting there in longer time.
And again, through the chair, that I'll look forward to your comments when we come in and explain how we're going to strategically go through each train and what we're looking to do. There is absolutely no plan just to go and add time in. It's actually a very strategic analysis of where we've lost, where it is, and how do you merge the trains from all three lines coming in, and where do we need to put that time. And you're going to see that we've broken it down to every section of the railroad. So it is not simply an add minutes to the schedule. What we're looking at is to truly run all the trains that we're currently running and put out a schedule that we can adhere to going forward. Is your microphone on?
I already violated it. I said I have 3 points and I'll make them quickly. First, thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, Chair. But I have a suggestion on how to make the committee meetings even smoother. And I do agree with the Chair's point about talking to staff prior to the meeting. The problem is if you get the materials on Thursday or Friday of the day before the meeting, basically one business day before the meeting, that does not leave adequate time for you to reach out with respectful professional time courtesies on both sides to the senior staff to ask the questions. So for the umpteenth time, and now I'm bringing it public, could we please get the materials a couple days earlier? I represent public boards for a living in my day job, and I represent much smaller and less complicated, as well as other complicated agencies. I've never seen an agency deliver such voluminous materials with such short notice to a board. So please, it's a two-way street on that. With respect to following up on Commissioner Merdler's comments, and your very thoughtful comments, I would just say that the way I would say it is they're not mutually exclusive goals, and that safety has to be the predicate assumption to everything. Our loved ones, ourselves, the riding public has to have a safe railroad, but that does not mean it's mutually exclusive to operations reliability and ease of operations. And my last point is, and I'll take this up outside of the public meeting, the operations report, sometimes change is good, and with change, maybe we have a better way of presenting the operations reports that we have this month, for example, on 126. And I have a couple of suggestions. I think these percentages, although they may be the traditional way of doing it, may not be the most helpful way of informing the board. It certainly doesn't make it easy to isolate what the problems are. I'm getting an increased number of complaints from various people in all forms: text, phone, cell, email, personal, and the like, about the performance. And without changing anything I said earlier, perhaps we could help you if the material were presented in a slightly different format, and I'm happy to discuss that away from the meeting. Thank you.
Joe or Jim, I'm not sure how this works now. You mentioned in your remarks the change in the PTC approach or emphasis, and I wonder if you could be a little bit more specific as to what is being done now that was not being done before. The impression that well, I won't characterize what was being done before, because I frankly never understood it.
I apologize, again through the chair, I apologize that I was trying to get a clarification. On the positive train control, is your question geared towards what is going to happen with the positive train control, or what are we now doing that in order to, okay, all right. In terms of what has happened now and what we're looking to go and do, several of what we as an agency were criticized for in terms of speed compliance, we went through to enforce the drop down of speeds, basically by putting in transponders that would force the locomotive engineer to drop a speed before they got into that particular area. It's not something that was done before. It is like a precursor to positive train control. In the future, every time we have a restriction out there, even if it's for a track gang going out there and going to work, positive train control is going to force compliance, and it's just going to be done automatically. We have had what is known as, in the industry, a signal compliance. In other words, if the signal has changed, it forces a compliance with that signal. But for what would be a normal, if a bridge has been 40 miles an hour for the last 100 years, that was considered part of qualifications. The engineer knew that they had to bring that, the engineer and conductor knew that he or she had to bring that train down to that speed. What we have initiated right now is what I'll call an interim process that, aside from the signal compliance, we're also putting in the civil speed restriction that would bring that train down to that speed, which was not part of the original package when cab signal went in there with speed control, because the cab signal that Metro North has does just that. It enforces the last signal. So if the signal was clear, you go maximum authorized speed. It was an approach limited, you could go 45. If it was approach, it was 30. And if it was restricted, the maximum speed you could go is 15. Now what we've done is we've done on those areas where there's more than I believe it's 20 mile an hour difference in the speeds, we have forced a compliance with that restriction that will bring the train down into that going in. So this is all as a result of what we found with the accident that took place. Did that answer your question, or do you need to?
Well, I don't want to press it, but positive train control I view as being the program that is going to be implemented in 2015, 16, 17, 18, whatever the date is. And the implication was that we're doing something today to get that program up and operating that we weren't doing before. And I'd like to know what that is, if it can be said in a short presentation, and why we weren't doing it before.
You know, again through the chair. One of the issues that we were facing as an industry is that positive train control came out and nobody understood what positive train control was going to be. It was a concept that was being developed. What has changed recently is that that concept is now a reality. We know what it can do, all right, and decisions were made now to go ahead and go forward with it. But the initial thoughts of positive train control was that it was a theory, and that theory got federal funding, and that federal funding put together a program that we had the potential of what it was going to do. And I would say that as an industry, we were a little bit reluctant until we knew that it was real to make a lot of investments in that. Now, I'm not going to talk about the past here at Metro North in terms of what decisions were made, but now that we know that it is a reality, that the freight railroads are going with it, that the passenger railroads are going with it, we have now fully adopted going forward. And I'm not saying that there wasn't a full adoption before. What I'm saying is there was a lot of uncertainty. Now that uncertainty is gone. It's a reality. We know how we're going to put it in, and the investments are being made strategically to go and do it. And the chairman has pledged that we will get the positive train control in as quickly as we can get it in.
So the tie-in with our troubles is coincidental.
I'm just going to agree with you for the time being on that. I don't know how else to go and respond on that, you know.
We're going to go back to public comments. We have two public speakers. First one being Orrin Getz.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for letting us speak today. We know the meeting started early, but we really weren't informed. New Jersey Transit has a policy of sending out email messages to concerned people when there is a change in the meeting, and maybe the MTA can do likewise. It works very well with New Jersey Transit, and hope that you can do the same. I just want to let you know that on 10 days ago, I met with Ronnie Hakem. She's the new executive director of New Jersey Transit. And she had worked here at the MTA, and hopefully that can be a big positive in working relationship with New Jersey Transit. I also, at the meeting with her, was Rose Heck, who is the mayor of a place called Hasbrook Heights, which is along the Pascack Valley line. And she's also a member of the New Jersey Association of Rail Passengers with me, and we discussed what we can do possibly to get a renegotiation of the memorandum of understanding that pertains to the Pascack Valley Line siding project, and maybe get the approval to go ahead and add the two missing sidings, which is would be a big benefit for west of Hudson passengers. As we know right now, the Gulf siding and the Vale siding were never built, so we still have a 14-mile railroad with 10 stations, and it's all single track, and that's a big restriction. Also, 2 days before our meeting with Ms. Hakem, we had the New Jersey Transit Board meeting, and I was surprised to hear from Chairman Simpson that he would very like to see through service from New Jersey Transit up to Connecticut. And hearing that from them, I think could just open the doors to have more service that way. So I think it's something that you can look into. And finally, just one item. On February 28th, the Mass Transit Task Force for the new Tappan Zee Bridge did release its final report. And they recommended a bus rapid transit system for the Tappan Zee corridor. And they said for rail, the best alternative was to enhance the services west of Hudson, and they clearly showed how the express trains do a better job than possibly running a train over the Tappan Zee Bridge into Grand Central Terminal. So with that going to the governor, I think we have a good opportunity to work with New Jersey Transit to make many important transit improvements on the west of Hudson. Thank you.
Thank you. Our second public speaker is Murray Bowden.
My name is Richard Ravitch. Richard Ravitch spoke here last meeting as a public speaker. I want the same courtesy. I looked up. Oh, I have new hearing aids, by the way, and that's getting used to. I lost one in the old city of Jerusalem about a month ago. The new one, I don't have to wear those things here anymore, but I'm having a little trouble getting used to them. I pulled the agenda off the meeting last night. It wasn't there Saturday, 'cause I couldn't look at it. It has the change time. But you didn't put in next to it, meeting changed, time changed, which would have caught my attention because I was here at 10 minutes to 8 this morning and nobody said, talk to somebody. Nobody said the meeting was starting early. The law says, but you know, who cares? I sent you up a picture, Joe. These are sculptures I made, and Chuck, you pass that around. These are sculptures I made. They're colorful. They could go in the area between the two platforms in Hartsdale. Would kind of brighten it up a little bit. Hartsdale Station, by the way. Some years ago, I requested that they take out the ticket booths, and somebody told me that they weren't going to take out the ticket booths because they might use them again. The reality of it was that they wanted to get Starbucks to pay more rent, and Starbucks didn't. So for 2 years, you refused to take out the ticket booths, and it was cold this morning, and we were standing outside. So why don't you take out the ticket booths? And then I took the train in this morning, and I see on Fordham it says, train arrived. If it says train arrived, then you have the electronics that say, it's here. Or you could say, on a public address system, there's a train coming, step back from the edge. But you don't do that because we never did. So if you live at 125th Street and there are 4 tracks and every train that comes in there blows its whistle, which is not a federal regulation, it is a leftover from the New York Central Railroad. So why don't we stop blowing the train whistles? Toot toot. Well, because red fire engines are nicer than white or yellow. By the way, that business in the power failure up in New Haven line, I don't know, you heard my report, but that could have been put back in service completely, or at 90–80% in 24 hours. The reality is if you could run one train, you can run most of them. But because of the culture developed here, we have to do it the old-fashioned way. It took over a week. I went to the Blumenthal hearings in Connecticut. I was the only one that sat through all the panels. Very interesting. Metro-North was there with a line of baloney. Con Edison also funked. And the reality was, if you can run one train, you can run 80% of them. Why? Really? What are you going to do? Carry me out again? I was once, maybe you don't remember it, but I was once physically carried out of here by 2 detectives, one of which is hiding somewhere because he's embarrassed. I mentioned it to him this morning. Are you going to have me physically carried out of here again? You didn't have Richard Ravitch carried out. The culture here has been to, hey, on time. I'm not ready. What, then what? You're going to carry me out? Go ahead. Let's get it. Let's get that done. Sure, I'd be glad to be carried out again. Is that the way you run the meetings? You don't give us information when we're supposed to get here, and then you're going to cut me off, but you let him speak. What are there, 2 sets of rules? I get to follow one, he gets to follow a different one? Tell me, which? I know what you're saying. Why? Because you told me to?
Thank you. Okay, now we have information items. There are 3 items of information. Joe?
The following are reports that are in your package: the 2013 Annual Ridership Report, the Annual Strategic Investments and Planning Study Report, and the Diversity and EEO Report for the 4th quarter of 2013. We are here as a team to be able to answer any questions the committee may have on those items.
Chuck?
Perhaps you can help me resolve some personal confusion. I have looked at the Corporate Governance Committee report, which we received over the weekend, and it contains a chart and a discussion for some reason as to the performance indicators and other facts concerning Metro North and other agencies that is inconsistent with the information that is in the Metro North book. Now, while the governance report is stated on a year-over-year basis, and yours is somewhat differently stated, if you just take a look at two pieces of information in page 31 of the governance report, it states a different number for farebox operating ratios than you have at page 140 of your book. As to employee lost time, it states a different number than you have at page 123 of your book. I know you didn't write it, and I don't charge you with it by any means. But it seems to me, A, why do we have two different sets of numbers? B, why is it that governance has this information? For example, it says in here that female hirings are less than the available market. Makes no such comment in here. So my point is, consistency may be the hobgoblin of small minds, but data should not be inconsistent.
I will look
Again, I
into it.
don't
No,
charge you with it.
and I know you haven't, but let me at least respond from the standpoint that I do know that they are dependent on us, and sometimes the information flow that's gone there, I'll have to look into. You've made a good point, and I'll look into it and get back to you on it.
I do appreciate it.
Any other questions? Jim?
Thank you, Jim. Just as a general matter, I feel that reports of this nature, and especially after a year such as we've been through, do merit some more formal presentation and time in our schedule. Maybe not this particular month, but it really is a time for the committee to see, in a gross way, what management feels are the important points to be understood from the past year. We can all obviously focus on the big events, but there's a lot of detail in here that needs to be kind of sorted and prioritized. I speaking for myself, and I hope for the committee, I feel it's unfortunate that something that's taken this much work is, I think, getting kind of short shrift. That being said, I'll pick my item anyway, which is customer communication through electronic means, meaning the platform LEDs and the LCD and the other form of communication that has been installed on all platforms, but simply says good service. And to ask that at some point we do have a report that will show what the policy is here, because it looks to me as though it's very mangled at this point. We seem to be going down 2 or 3 different roads at the same time, or maybe some not, and some more proactively. The main point being that communicating where we stand to our customers when it comes to their ride is pretty important. Thank you.
Any other questions? John?
Again, just a quick comment. On page 43, the middle bullet point, that type of comment. I just, maybe for the future, we don't need, I think objective, not subjective is the point of this, and there's no need for adverbs or adjectives, particularly in the context of what happened last year. The notion of did very well despite the challenges it's borderline offensive when the challenges involve the issues we've discussed. Thank you.
John,
Can I make 3 very quick points? If you will look at page 62, you have at the bottom paragraph, bullet point, enhanced monitoring of compliance. May I ask that you take a look at the possibility of including at appropriate places speed cameras on the tracks the way they have them on the highways and byways of New York? You can capture information that way that may be useful. It may be too expensive, but would you take a look at it and see if it makes any sense? The second one is something I found in here that I thought was troublesome. If memory serves me correctly, and I'm referring to page 65, if memory serves me correctly, and at my advanced age I will not rely on memory, there were complaints concerning the M8s and snow getting into the cars during the last season. And you have a report or a comment in here that we're ordering more of them. 2 questions, if I may, in that regard. One, is something being done to make sure that that issue is not repeated? Senator Blumenthal commented on it, and it seems to me that it's something apt to address. And number 2, is this the right car to order?
Before I turn it over to John, who has a mechanical background, I also wanted to point out that one of the things I was pleasantly surprised with when I had to deal with the first storm that hit was the M8s were not causing the grounding problems with the wire that the other equipment had done. So in fact we have seen a dramatic improvement and could have better reliability with the M8s. And John, now if you could address the snow portion of it.
Absolutely. As I briefly touched on at the last meeting, Mr. Merdler, during the month of January, the snow issue with the M8s was isolated to the auxiliary power system, or the inverter that converts the regular power to the power used on the train to support lighting, heat, and air conditioning. Those failures were identified by Kawasaki, the car builder. The root cause analysis was identified between Kawasaki and the supplier of the inverter, and Kawasaki has developed a modification that we're currently implementing to get that particular failure mode behind us in advance of next winter.
May I ask, is Kawasaki going to pay for this, I hope?
Yes, Kawasaki, per the contract requirements, are obligated under their cost to cover labor and material for any outstanding warranty items, and they have been doing that, and they will continue to do so.
Terrific. And my last point, if I may, is a matter of something that I read on page 87, which gave me a sense of delightful surprise, unusual I might add, namely the concept that there is the possibility of stations being located on the Empire Line in the vicinity of 125th Street and the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Is there a reasonable possibility that in your lifespan, or which is longer than mine in all likelihood, that could happen?
Are you pointing to me when you say longer lifestyle?
I would sincerely hope so.
First off, I'm going to be candid, I'm not conversant enough to go and give you an answer to that right now. I'll come back to you with that. I would like to answer your speed signs, which I actually found as an interesting challenge to be able to put something like that out there, but I also want to remind you, you are supporting our putting in positive train control. And the positive train control is going to enforce all the speeds all the way through the territory. So in effect, it will not allow a crew to go better than the maximum authorized speed in any location on the railroad. So putting something like that in, if it was expensive, would be a little bit redundant when we're actually going for state-of-the-art going forward. And I'll get back to you on the other issue.
any other questions? Okay, next on the agenda is procurements. We have 7 Metro North procurements for March totaling approximately $68 million. One item has been pulled for further review. Joe? Can I get a motion first? And then a second? And then we will have discussion. Motion made? Second? All in favor? Okay. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I would call your attention to a couple of the procurements to raise a question, which some of you may have heard in another context. On page 107, the Norcon Communications proposal, I see no reference to an MBWE allocation for that. Why?
Through the chair, and Tony,
Did they indicate why? But is it possible that the contractor could be asked in the future when bids go out? All right.
We're working with the PCR, change some of the contract terms and conditions going forward, taking those things and others into consideration.
And in the RFPs themselves indicating it's a factor that might be considered?
There's a legal issue there, but we will discuss that with the legal department as far as the selection determination and selection criteria.
If that's an issue, Mr. Henley, I would really like to be briefed on that promptly. Second one, if I may. The second one is the question concerning the RFP proposal for design and delivery of autonomous track geometry. Oh no, it's not. Yeah, assembly. It's on page 112. It's the assembly and delivery of onboard video camera recording system. The question I have there and in a couple of others is, have you determined that pre-qualification as contrasted with an RFP could not fill the same bill? In other words, in a pre-qualification process you can determine many of the issues that you now address in the RFP process and why you advocate it. Isn't it possible to have pre-quals and then have a straight ordinary bid as among those who bid? It provides for less room for subjective determinations, I would think, and compliance more with state law. And if you can't answer that now, that's fine. Just let me have an answer at your meetings.
you know what? I would rather come back to you with it, because even though I'm familiar with a lot of that from prior life, it's something that I think can be handled better where if I have an opportunity to go and come and talk to you separately on it.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question on the escalator one on 113. And Joe, to the extent any of these are unfair because of your newness, that's fine. This is a bit of a follow-up to what's been going on for a while. While you were, I guess, in Florida, the frequent breakdowns of the escalators in Grand Central. Didn't we just upgrade them though? Because many of them were out for multiple weeks at a time getting repaired, and I thought they were upgraded and repaired. Now we seem to be replacing them. Could someone explain that either now or on the side during the week?
Through the chair? Okay. John, go ahead, because I am aware.
Mr. Ballin, as Mr. Permit previously updated the committee, there were 2 issues with the escalators within Grand Central. As you noted, they had a very poor reliability. That was driven by 2 issues. One is our previous contractor had some difficulty getting parts and maintaining the escalators. Through that, we had a joint procurement with the Long Island Railroad. We got a new maintenance contractor on board. There was a 2-phased approach to this. One was to get the escalators that are currently installed in Grand Central to a more reliable mode of operation. That's been accomplished over the last 12 to 18 months in preparation for the longer range replacement of the escalators. The escalators in Grand Central, when they were installed, were not of a heavy-duty commercial variety that would be more suited to the terminal. So based on the high volume of traffic and the standard duty rating of the escalators, that's what precipitated their lower reliability. So yes, there's a two-phased approach. One is to repair the escalators, and number two is to replace them in the future.
All right, thank you. And then I have the same question for the 114, 115, the series of safety-related items. And, you know, I'm going to be supportive, but I'm curious, why all of a sudden it seems like we're waking up? Why? I agree, safety is the predicate assumption. Why all of a sudden now do we realize we need to gauge the track and do what's laid out on 114 and in 115 outside of the report? Isn't that something that should be a part of what's done from the operations standpoint?
The chair. I'm going to again refer to what we've gotten back in FRA reports, so that, you know, very clearly there you can see the reason for the request here. The other part is that we are actually going through. And one of the things that I've become aware of, for example, is that we did not have our own geometry car here at Metro North. The sister agencies did. I'm not saying we didn't do geometry readings, but we need to change even that as part of our business going forward. So you're going to see some requests coming in for safety-related items that are state-of-the-art, that are going to be able to take care of those issues going forward. And I'm also going to say to you, the fact that it's been pointed out to us by the FRA, some of the defects that are there, I'm not going to try and go back in time and explain why it degenerated to where it is, but what you're seeing are bona fide requests for the type of equipment that we're going to need to maintain this railroad going forward.
Well, along those lines, and my final point, and that comment had to do with page 117, all the similar safety related, but to try and not fight the last battle, which is, I'm fine for fighting, because we need to follow the suggestions laid out in the reports, and we also need to do what we need to do to maintain safety is the absolute essential component of the system. But just thinking a little outside the box, perhaps, just anticipating. So on page 112, you have something I also going to support, but that has to do with when we transport, or when other items are being transported on our tracks by others.
Yes.
Again, I've asked this before. How do we know what they're transporting? Because that's not addressed by this. This is just dealing with weight and speed and the like. Are we sure we know what's in there?
Through the chair. The answer is yes. There's a federal requirement that all, and particularly whenever there's anything that's hazardous, that information has to be conveyed to each of the railroads. What we're doing in this is making sure that everything that comes across has another layer, even though you've already seen that CSX is putting in detectors. We are enhancing that by the detectors that we're putting in to ensure that anything that has come down will not only check those that have come to us from foreign railroads, but it'll also enhance our own ability to detect earlier whether or not we're having problems with heat in the axles or any of the other problems that are coming forward. So the first part of your question is, yes, we do know what's coming to us. The second part is, this is a further insurance that everything that is coming on has met all the requirements going forward.
And we have a system of checks and balances in place so that we're notified of certain items on the train, that if there's anything questionable, that they'll run up the chain of command.
Particularly anything that is hazardous, we get full notification on that. It is sent in. We have that information before it even comes to the railroad.
Okay. Any questions?
I mean, I too wondered about the track geometry car, because I assumed that Metro North had one because I knew Long Island had them. But be that as it may, I know that all the railroads seem to contract with services such as Sperry to look at the track, and I didn't find out until there was a Long Island Railroad derailment that actually there are components of the track that cannot be checked with this equipment, and it actually failed on Long Island Railroad. I was just wondering, does this equipment check, there's I think rail fasteners and the joints between the rails, and there's some other components that are not.
I mean, that's the one that was pulled.
I don't know if that's part of this or if there's something that.
Oh, this is right. Through the chair, can I let John respond on that? Go ahead, John.
With regards to what you just mentioned, there are certain components on the tracks that historically have not been available to perform a automated inspection on. As you stated, rail joints and rail fastening systems. There's also a ratification currently in the book for your approval today with regards to a contract to Georgetown Rail, where we're contracting with them this year to perform 2 machine vision inspections of our track structure. Those machine vision inspections will look at rail end mismatch, do a machine vision inspection of rail joints and insulated joints, and also look at the fastening systems that actually attach the rail to the ties. So it's basically the fact that historically the technology did not exist from equipment to do those types of inspections, and with the change of philosophy, we're now heading towards supplemental automated inspections above which our track inspectors do regularly.
Jim?
Thank you. Just very quickly, is it reasonable to assume that if we hit on all burners or in this program, that this railroad will be ahead of the curve in terms of infrastructure, monitoring, safety?
Chair. One of the goals here is that, and I've said it before, Metro North was one of the leaders in the industry in terms of safety and technology, and in fact had at one time been accused of gold plating the railroad. When we get done, and you're going to see some more items come to you because we are going to need, and I'm glad that the other board member had brought this up, the fact that we need a geometry car. We need to use technology, proven technology. I won't take you down a path of unproven technology, but I'm going to be coming to you with some items that we need that will ensure that we've got the latest in terms of the testing, and it is our intent that we will once again not only be running a safe railroad, but will be the model railroad. That's why the chairman has already put in that he wants to take the lead with the C3RS. Okay, we'll be one of the first commuter passenger railroad systems to do that in conjunction with the FRA. The other end of it is that everything that we're doing here supports are going in a way that you always need the human intervention. We need our people out there doing their jobs, but the technology that becomes available that can mitigate those times that someone will miss something and it will be picked up automatically and we can send our forces to go and deal with that. That's what is the attempt here, and that's what we'll be going forward with. So the answer is, what you have stated is our goal going forward, to be the leaders in terms of a safe system going forward.
Any other questions?
A number of these items are being done both for Metro North and the Long Island Railroad, and I want to thank Metro North for taking the lead on a number of these items. They are obviously essential to the safety and reliability on both systems, and I'm glad to see that we're working together to try to make both systems as safe as possible.
And again, through the chair, I want to make it very clear that the chairman has made that a goal, that he has all of us, every single storm, every single incident, all of the sister agencies are in conversation. Even when we had this incident with the explosion next to our tracks, I had the complete support of the Transit Authority. Carmen and I were on the phone back and forth. There is tremendous cooperation, and I give credit to the chair.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to make note that on page 14, that procurement has been pulled. So, page 114 of 114 has been pulled. Okay. Joe.
I chose to pull it. If that satisfies it, I won't go any further. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I got a motion and a second and need a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, carried. Well, we've got time to do some of our normal reports. Ann, you're up.
Thank you. Normal safety report is in your books beginning on page 122. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to respond to them regarding the year-to-date or the month-to-date numbers compared to last year. Joe really took you through most of the enhanced safety action plan found on 124, but we can answer any questions if you need. One of the things to note, we did hold a corporate safety stand down following our fatality this month. We'll be doing that again, scheduling another one as was indicated, and we will be holding those quarterly going forward. It is an opportunity to get a tremendous amount of feedback from our employees and an opportunity to follow up with them with any concerns that they've had and relate to us going forward. So that's something that we will really take advantage of. Yes.
In your report on lost time and injuries on page 122, you indicate that the record on lost time and restricted duty in 2013 was an improvement over 2012. See that?
Yes, I do.
But in the report that was given to the governance committee on your lost time and injury, they have it as worse. They say that in 2012 it was 1.90 and in 2013 it was 2.43. Which is the correct number?
I'll need to get back to you and check on that. I'm honestly not sure looking at the book, and I don't have the governance numbers in front of me.
And I'm reasonably sure that 9 out of 10 people in this room do not. Nor do they look at it if they're not on the committee. My point is the one I made earlier. Let's get some consistency here. This is an area that particularly troubles members of the committee from time to time on the injury rate.
I will just make a note, though, that those numbers do fluctuate from time to time because the information coming into us changes. So as we provide numbers to another agency or to headquarters, even if they're not at the same moment in time, the numbers can vary.
Ms. Kirsch, if I may, it is now the month of March. By this point in time, you ought to know, and there ought to be a statistic for 2013 and 2012 that's fixed. You're sounding like the police department.
It's the same thing all over again, isn't it? No, but that really is. That's what you're saying. It's like the police.
Okay. Any more questions for Ann? John?
I'm going to attempt to give some clarity to the numbers that were mentioned earlier. So bear with me. There are 3 main items that kind of drive our below than normal on-time performance or below than expected on-time performance. One, as Joe had mentioned earlier, it's the correlation between the schedule versus the infrastructure constraints. Our planning department's doing a great job analyzing those, and we'll be talking about those in the future. Emergency Order 29, which basically was spoken about earlier, also slowed down the railroad. And I just want to also bring out the third major driver was the extreme winter conditions we've had this year with regards to both snowfall and extreme cold durations. The last winter of this nature was back in 2011. When we compare our performance in 2014 compared to that of 2011, it's comparable, although we can still do better. January and February winter weather conditions provide challenges to our customers and Metro North. We operated at 88% overall, 84.6% for the peak periods, and had a constant compliance of 98.2%. The average train delay that our customers experienced was 14.5 minutes, and we completed 99.2% of our scheduled trips. Our Harlem Line customers experienced the most reliable service at 91% overall, 89.4% in the peaks, and had a constant compliance of 99.2%. Hudson Line customers experienced 90% overall, 87.5% in the peaks, and a constant compliance of 99.4%. New Haven Line operated at only 85% overall, 79.1% in the peaks, and had a constant compliance of only 96.6%. So as has been the pattern over the last several months and last several years, our New Haven Line customers have the least reliable service of the three. And they lag approximately 5% behind the H&H due to the infrastructure constraints and those items we talked about previously. Also, as Joe has mentioned, we completed the implementation of Emergency Order 29 cab signal changes last Friday, and on the out of New Haven trains, those have added 7 to 10 minutes of additional running time. During April, we're going to be starting and completing a lot of the infrastructure work in advance of the May 11th schedule change, track 1 in the Bronx. Also during the winter, we've generated 30 slow orders. We weren't able to effect repairs to those due to frozen ballast conditions. As the temperatures warm up, we're restarting addressing those areas with our forces. As we mentioned briefly last month, our Danbury branch customers have suffered lack of train service during the off-peaks. We've been busing that operation. We ran into some technological issues with the grade crossing technology that was installed last year. We have a interdisciplinary team between Metro North forces, the state of Connecticut, and a third-party oversight provided by AECOM. We've identified a number of technical corrections. This past weekend, we renewed a grade crossing in its totality at East Liberty Street, and we have additional work scheduled for next weekend. And based on the track we're on now, we're expecting to be able to restore off-peak train service to Danbury Line customers sometime in April in advance of our May schedule change. With regards to our rolling stock and fleet performance, both January and February performance has been below expectations, primarily driven by the winter weather events. January performance was 41% below goal. We only operated at a mean distance between failure of 94,000 miles. During the month of February, our H&H EMU fleet consisting of M3s and M7s has recovered. The New Haven Line EMU fleet and our diesel fleet is starting to recover in March as we go through those challenges. And as we talked about previously on the M8s, we've identified a number of warranty corrections that Kawasaki and Metro North forces are implementing. And once those modifications are completed there, to perform as well as the M7s. Last meeting, I didn't get time to address our West of Hudson clientele. Our West of Hudson performance actually exceeds our East of Hudson, which is good for them, and we're going to strive to do as well in our East of Hudson service. West of Hudson OTP operated at 90.6% for the 2 months. The average train delay there was a little longer than on our East of Hudson. There was an average delay of 20.6 minutes, and 98.6% of scheduled trips were completed. The Pascack Valley line operated at 91.2%. The Port Jervis line operated slightly lower at 89.7%, and the overall consist compliance West of Hudson continues to be good at 99.4%. And if any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Chuck. Chuck.
3 questions, if I may. You commented that the Harlem line was among the most reliable. Now, am I right that it is on the Harlem line that you have been doing a considerable amount of work over the course of this period? Mm-hmm. And what I'm trying to understand is, notwithstanding the factor that would normally delay a train, namely road work, train work, it is the most reliable. Is there some secret that ought to be shared among all the lines?
Hopefully it's not a secret. If you look at the predominance of trains that operate on our Harlem line, The predominance of services provided by EMUs are M3s and M7s. Our M7s, as on the Long Island, have an extremely high reliability and operate at an MDBF that's in excess of 400,000 miles. That's one of the reasons why the Harlem line outperforms the Hudson, because on the upper Hudson, where we have non-electrified territory, we still have a predominance of diesel service there, and diesel service reliability is about 1/3 that of EMUs.
So, suggesting the possibility it may be wiser to order more M7s than M8s.
No, I'm not. I basically stated that EMUs are more reliable than diesel halt service, and we're locked into diesel halt service on the upper Hudson because of the cost of electrification is extremely high and not justifiable at this point.
Second question, you said that the repairs that have been done, not on the Harlem line but elsewhere, added 7 to 10 minutes of running time. Have the schedules been revised to reflect that you're going to take 10 more minutes to get there?
I'll let Mr. Schiffer from our planning department answer that, but I do know in the May schedule we're looking at adding the time required to accommodate the EO29 changes, and we're also looking at what other infrastructure constraints add to running time, but I can't speak to the details on that at
Through
this
the
time.
chair, I'd like to first. One of the things that happened was when we had to go and make these changes at the bridges and put the changes in, those changes alone put the time in. And John did a very good job at a public meeting because a lot of people just thought we put minutes in there. But if you took every one of the areas that the FRA had cited that we had to go and make a change, and you attributed the time to each of those locations, it clearly justified the additional time that it was taking to put it in. Now going back to where I started about what happened when we started to go through this review and the reason that we desperately need to go through a May schedule change, you will then see not only what we're talking about here, but we'll go through each one of the things, what has happened, what we anticipate may get better, but what we will see as being permanent going forward. So in answer to your question, there was time added, but as to whether or not it was strategically added, the answer is no, and that's part of the reason that we're doing okay, we're not doing great, and we need to modify the schedules.
If you could possibly let us have that information well in advance of the meeting, it'll enable us to take a good hard look at it. See, what I'm concerned about is, in a lifetime long ago, I traveled a train called the Weary Erie, and I'm trying to avoid the Metro Moper. And that's my concern. Can I get...
John?
Thank you. I will have 2 questions, leave the rest on these reports and leave the rest for another time. Again, on page 126, since I listened to yours, John, I'll read a couple of statistics from your page. Trains over 15 minutes late. Year to date, 1,021. Last year, 233. Trains canceled, 208. Last year, 18. The very well despite comment that I made earlier that may be reconsidered. I have a context. The percentages, if you look at certain trains, instead of this glomming up, so you're including the 10 o'clock train where not as many people take as the 8 o'clock train, you will find there was chronic lateness on some of the trains running between 7 and 9. Chronic lateness, and if you look at it train by train, perhaps you can do something to improve some of these individual trains as opposed to lumping it all into AM peak and AM reserve peak. On page 127, maintenance of way, I guess we understand what that's about, although I just want to, since you were reading numbers in the 90s, I'll read some numbers that jump out to me. 4,588 delays for 2 months. Last year, 456. But maintenance of equipment might not be explained by the safety checks, the important safety checks we're doing, the necessary safety checks. 764 versus 276. I don't think we're off to such a great start. If I can read and then jumping to standees, and then I'll jumping to the west of Hudson, you read how great it's doing. The Port Jervis line, AM peak, 75% on time. That means one quarter of the trains are not. That's not doing so well. And then the last point, standees. This is for another time, but based on my experience, I question the accuracy of some of the numbers. Because to say that there are 0 standees on the average it's just simply not true based on my personal experience in observation and also in standing.
Just say something in addition to that. I don't want to. It's not a pylon, but as far as standees go, I know because I'm getting a feeling of deja vu here from my experience at the Long Island Committee. We had this similar discussions. The standees. I mean, you could have standees on a train. We've gone this over and over again. Even though we don't show them here because people aren't using the third seat because of uneven loading. When you see standees on this report, it means it's something. It's really bad. That's what that means. It's a seriously overcrowded train. And I think we have to understand that what these things show is severe situations, and that there are a lot of standees on on Long Island. We have that. I mean, you could go but that's just on that. But on some of the other issues, I mean, I agree with John wholeheartedly. 75% is completely. I'm sure you do too. Even 90% probably is relatively low for an on-time performance figure. And to join in with John here, I did notice that Metro North decided this year to reduce its goals for on-time performance. Like I said, I remember a similar conversation with Long Island Railroad. We went through an exercise where I asked, can we even achieve the 95.1%? Long Island has committed to trying to achieve that. They have not been able to do that yet. It's a complicated system. They're still trying. I'd like to know what specific reasons are the goals for Metro North were reduced for this year, as opposed to reasons that cause, delays. Like the weather isn't a reason, but there must be some. And if you could lengthen the schedule, you lengthen the schedule because you want to have a realistic schedule. But
the decision to lower the goals was made by me. All right, and my number one reason for doing it was the reports that you've gotten from both the SB and the FRA. That there was a culture here of on-time over. If you looked at it from the standpoint of not only what I found when I first walked in terms of what we were actually achieving, everybody will try to meet a target and meet a number, all right? And if that is your primary goal, and it goes back to the discussion we were having before, and you get even outside agencies that come in to evaluate, and the first thing that they say is that it's a culture of getting everything in on time. And you get in a Federal Railroad Administration saying there's an entire culture of getting everything in on time. So one of the reasons that I chose to lower the on-time performance goals was so that people would truly hear from this organization that our primary focus is safety. On-time performance will come, as it will with the reliability. And it's also going back, and it's been said here a number of times, and you all keep coming back at it, about this strategic look at what's going to happen with this schedule. It was not my intent that I would be coming to a second meeting and spending so much time talking about a number of issues that I had to go and speak on because they had already affected this agency and it was time to report on it. In the future, it is my goal, my hopes that we're going to spend the time in transparency on exactly what you're talking about in terms of each train, what we've learned, so that way everybody will understand that going forward, and we can spend time on those proactive movements going forward rather than my spending the first half of a meeting basically having to explain what has been going on in terms of investigations that have occurred here and issues that are very sobering. But getting back, I'm going to say to you that I have heard it loud and clear. I've heard the need for you to have more information earlier, and I will do everything possible to go and do that. And it's also my intent that we have these type of meetings where there's an open exchange so we can all understand what we're doing going forward. But I chose to lower those numbers because I needed to get a message out there that the on-time performance cannot be the number one driver of a railroad that has gone through what we've gone through.
Just ask one specific question, and if you cannot answer it now, let me have it when you can. The folks on the New Haven line have got an astronomical number of standees, 140. Is there a reason, and if so, could we have it at some point?
You know, I'm going to say to you, let me come back, because there's a number of arguments that are being made there, some of which still have to be looked into more. In other words, seat changes on the M8s and other issues that have come in. So let me just say I'd rather be in a position of giving it to you factually.
Jim?
I'm sorry to do this, but I want to, without seeming to pile on, associate myself with John's and Ira's comments in this regard, that the numbers that are shown on this page on 126 and beyond are not just sobering. They're catastrophic, and I don't think that that level of both disclosure or acknowledgement of this of the magnitude of these changes is coming across from the other side. It's like it's almost as though we're kind of trying to pick our way into it, as opposed to having statements coming at us saying this is crazy. And I just think that it will help our relationships here if that's the way that these problems are approached from that side of the table.
Okay, due to a lack of time, I'm going to skip all the way to the chief. And he's been sitting here for a while trying to make a report. So.
Well, as mentioned, my stats are on page 176. If there's any questions. Of the two robberies, we did make an arrest in one, and the one is open. I'd just like to thank Metro North for their assistance on March 12th at the building explosion, specifically John Kesher's. Rich Farrar and Matt Peluso, they were great help to not only myself but the fire department and OEM up at the scene. And I'd like to also thank Metro North for the alcohol ban on the trains. On St. Patrick's Day, I think it definitely increased the safety and made for a reduction in incidents on that day. So if there's any questions.
Any questions for the chief? Okay, our next meeting is going to be on the 28th of April at 8:30. I need a motion to adjourn. Carry.